Additional labels like the one shown on the left inform us consumers about the food that we purchase, and today we express our own personal priorities and beliefs through the foods that we choose. It's true that consumers drive changes in the food industry, and Michael Pollan says that we get 3 votes a day with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Several companies have been developed to certify producers who are taking extra measures to care for the animals and people and soil involved in getting that food to your plate. Companies take these labels seriously. Their products wear them proudly, and with all of the brands and options to choose from, these labels can make a big difference in determining who makes it into your cart. One of the most puzzling words in the grocery literary genre is the term natural. If you want to learn about the backstory, read the article linked at the bottom of the page. It showed up on NPR in 2016, and it's by a religion professor who is exploring the meaning of natural as it pertains to our food. It turns out there have been several attempts to legally define this term for use by food companies, once by the Federal Trade Commission in 1974, then by the FDA in 1991, but no one could come up with a consensus of what natural should be defined as. Then, in 2009, companies started getting sued for false advertising. Snapple called itself all natural, but that was deemed deceptive since the drinks contained high fructose corn syrup. After that, the food industry wanted the FDA to standardize the term, while the Consumers Union, the group that comes out with the consumer reports, wanted natural to be completely prohibited. The USDA deals with the term in the context of its organic foods, but its definition of minimally processed and containing no artificial ingredients only pertains to meat and egg products. There's small oversight involved in getting approval for this label, but understand that there are no standards or regulations for natural food products if they do not contain meat or eggs. Here are some examples of mislabeling lawsuits with brands that you surely have heard of. And let's start with a label here that the USDA does oversee and regulate. So what does it mean to be organic? Well, it's all about abiding by the national list of allowed and prohibited substances. This describes the synthetic substances a farmer can use and the organic substances that the farmer cannot use. This list is voted on by the National Organic Standards Board, and the overarching National Organic Program enforces the policies, certifies farms, and regulates organic policies overall. And this group is appointed by the Secretary of Agriculture, and the board members come from a well-represented variety of related industries. Organic products do not contain genetically modified organisms and have strict guidelines on synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, animal feed, antibiotic and hormone use, outdoor access, and supports humane animal treatment. There are 4 classes of organic. Since most food products are created with ingredients from multiple farms, some of which are certified organic and some of which are not, the percentage of ingredients that are organic determines whether these terms can be used. 100% organic is just that, using 100% organic ingredients. To be able to flaunt the USDA organic seal, you need to have at least 95% organic ingredients. You may also read made with organic ingredients, which means that at least 70% of those ingredients are organic. And finally, made with specific organic ingredients means that less than 70% of the ingredients list is organic. And it seems like everyone has an opinion on genetically modified organisms. In a 2015 ABC News survey, 93% of people were in favor of labeling GMO products. 64 countries around the world have such a label, but not the US and Canada. There has not been widespread evidence that they are themselves harmful, though they do carry more herbicide residue on them, since 80% of GMOs were genetically modified for the purpose of withstanding strong herbicides. Unlike the USDA's labeling of organic, the Non-GMO Project is an independent company with their own vetting and certification process. Instead of waiting for the government to mandate GMO labeling, this company went out and told companies, look, consumers care about this. Let us come in and check you out, and if you're clean, Then we'll put this label on that makes your product stand out. And the program became so popular that over 50,000 products have now been verified. Biotechnology companies are able to obtain patents on their novel GMO life forms and are able to control the use and distribution of their seeds. And there have been many very public disputes where companies who make GMOs have the power to sue farmers whose fields have been contaminated with GMOs, even when it's the result of the drift of pollen coming from neighboring fields. Control of seed-saving practices also made headlines and was featured in the movie Food Inc., which gained a lot of popularity. More recently, hundreds of cancer patients are suing Monsanto, the maker of Roundup and Roundup Ready seeds, for failing to inform consumers of their carcinogenic effects. The first case is going to trial in 2018 with a man who used Roundup weed killer 20 to 30 times a year working as a pest manager for a county school system in California. Free range or cage-free, which means that the animals cannot be contained and are allowed to roam freely over large open spaces. It's really only defined by the USDA. The labeling is not regulated as heavily as organic foods, and it's easy to attain. There have been proposals to have the USDA regulate the use of free range as a label, but the producers of the products are the ones who decide really what constitutes free range. You may have noticed this Certified Humane Raised and Handled label. This is led by a 40-member scientific committee comprised of animal scientists and veterinarians from all over the world. They have species-specific experts who go around conducting inspections on farms. In order to be certified, animals have to act like they would normally act, with ample space and shelter, fresh water, quality feed without animal byproducts, added antibiotics, or hormones. There are a lot of labels associated with beef, and maybe the most ubiquitous today is grass-fed, rather than being corn-fed. Feedlots, or concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, give cows lots of grain and corn, which ends up giving the cow liver insulin resistance, and that promotes fat deposits at the muscle, which gives the meat its marbling. It ends up being a greasier piece of meat, and it's higher in omega-6 fatty acids. Meanwhile, the grass-fed beef is leaner, juicier, higher in omega-3s and conjugated linoleic acid, and it also has more antioxidant and anti-inflammatory compounds. So grass-fed is substantially healthier. Grass-fed cattle typically still consume grain later in life prior to slaughter, and if a label says grass-finished, it means that it has had grass its entire life. RBGH is a genetically engineered bovine growth hormone similar to the natural growth hormone that cows produce. It boosts milk production by about 10%, some say 30%, but it also leads to several health issues in the cow. It's been banned by the European Union, Japan, and Canada for quite some time, but it's still legal in the United States. There's been a lot of public pressure over the last decade, and many companies like Starbucks and Ben & Jerry's have gotten in front of the issue. It's now becoming harder to find milk with hormones than without. In fact, in 2018, about 90% of Wisconsin dairy cows are now RBGH free. We'll now move into part 4, which is the politics. Now, food is political because many policies determine who gets what food and at what price. We talked about the controversies behind the farm subsidies, but we also have debates over how poorer Americans should receive healthier food. It could be in tax incentives for big stores like Publix to set up shop in urban food deserts. It could be what plant-based requirements are set for vendors to be able to accept food stamps. Politics certainly are responsible for the food information our children see in TV commercials as well. But of all the politics in food topics, talk is loudest when it comes to our kids. School lunch programs provide over half of the daily calories for a significant amount of kids in our country, and the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010 sought to raise nutrition standards for the schools. This was one of Michelle Obama's big initiatives, cutting down on salt and fat in favor of more whole grains, fresh fruits and vegetables. And meeting these end goals comes with obstacles, namely financial obstacles. These more stringent requirements would cost districts money, collectively over $1 billion or more in 2015. And meanwhile, fewer students are opting in on school lunch, which means schools have less revenue to pay for increased food costs. Cost is a very understandable obstacle, and arguments can be made based on how much we should be prioritizing healthy food in our school budgets, or whether it would require higher school taxes to do so. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue, unrelated to Purdue chickens, cut back restrictions and eased the restriction schedule, which allowed schools to serve less whole grains and more sodium and more flavored milk. In addition to his stance on the cost of healthier lunches, he raised some eyebrows by saying that schools should pay more attention to what the kids want, to balance the nutritional aspect with palatability. Of course, when kids are asking for sugary, salty, fatty foods, adults shouldn't just give it to them. You could read this quote on your own time, but the policies related to school lunches will inevitably change over time, as will programs attempting to employ healthier vending machines, school gardens, nutrition education. If we expect to be healthier in the future and reduce healthcare costs, we need to come up with sensible solutions for schools which advocate consumption of real food. Food policies in general rarely get national attention. They're rarely even brought up in town halls or presidential debates. But there may be some changes to the payment structure for programs that shape the way we get our food. The first isn't as likely to happen here, but there are certain politicians pushing to separate the farmer-related side of the farm bill that we talked about, including the subsidies, from the nutrition-related side of the bill, mainly that SNAP program, that supplemental nutrition program for poorer individuals. By not being bundled together, each bill could be more exposed to attacks, and funding for either side could end up being more at risk than it is today. Immigration has been front and center in the news, and I've seen both parties make a case for going after the employers of illegal immigrants in order to disincentivize those crossing the border illegally. Those companies are largely agricultural, from dairy farms to growers of fruits and vegetables, and the politics of big business versus immigration could get a bit dicey if immigration laws end up targeting these larger corporations. Next up is a topic currently in progress, and that's the 2018 Farm Bill. In its current form, the bill has an emphasis of promoting local and regionally produced food and long-term investments in organic and sustainable agriculture. While it doesn't make any changes to farm subsidies, it maintains funding to maintain water quality conservation programs, which the price-conscious House of Representatives wanted to cut by $800 million. It's not the final bill yet, but we'll see what happens in the coming months if the priority does shift to smaller, local, and regional sustainable farming. The Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Scott Gottlieb said there's a way to change eating behaviors, and he points to studies showing that the change is on the order of 50 calories a day. And that method is simply posting calorie information. It started as a provision in the Affordable Care Act and went into effect in May of 2018. The law requires chains with at least 20 stores to post calorie information on all menus and menu boards. It's something that Panera and McDonald's started doing a while back, and it has both affected consumer choices at the register and influenced having lighter options on the menu. Of course, there was some pushback from the National Association of Convenience Stores and the National Grocers Association, and that led to a delay in the date that this finally went into effect. But this policy is one that you've probably recognized already. Here are a couple of quotes. The first from Margot Wooten, who is the Vice President for Nutrition at the Center for Science in the Public Interest, #DreamJob. And she says that this is just one of dozens of things that we should be doing to help Americans maintain a healthy weight and reduce their risk of diet-related health problems. And then there's Darren Bask of the Heritage Foundation, who says it's not up to the government to influence what people eat. That should be up to each individual. Yes, Darren, we need less transparency, and people will just naturally make healthier choices and will know better rather than being influenced by billions of dollars of marketing each year. According to people in the restaurant industry, the FDA has been really helpful with industry and Congress in order to make this a smooth enactment of this particular law. So we'll see how it works.